Hey guys, my name is David East, and today we're going to be making a combo box with Square UI. Now this tutorial is for both developers and designers. We're going to be starting out in Photoshop, so for you designers you'll be a bit more comfortable there. And in Photoshop we're going to measure out things, get colors, and gather everything we're going to need for the HTML. And then we're going to dive into Sublime Text, where you developers might feel a little bit more comfortable, and that's where we'll create all the HTML and CSS and JavaScript. For those of you who aren't familiar with Square UI, it's yet another amazing UI kit made by DesignModo. It's a great way to mock up a web app in little to no time. Square UI has a whole arsenal of UI elements for us to use. There's text boxes, there's buttons, combo boxes, checkbox, radios, calendars, progress bars. There's the whole gamut. But today we're going to be focusing on this combo box right over here. And a combo box is very similar to an HTML select element. When you click on this button to the right, it drops down a list full of options for the user to select. And then when you select one of the options, it will become the value of the text box above. And there's other features you can implement into this, including an autocomplete. Now if you want the full-blown copy of Square UI, it's going to cost $39. However, if you want to give Square UI a test drive before purchasing it, there's a free version. And the free version just includes one of the UI kits. And fortunately for us, it still includes this combo box. So now that you know all about Square UI, let's dive into Photoshop. So here in Photoshop, I have a copy of Square UI open, and this is one of the UI elements of the full-blown version. If you're using the free version, your layout might be a little bit different, but it's still the same combo box. So before we create our combo box in HTML and CSS, we're probably going to need to know a couple things, like what are the components made of, how tall is each component, how wide is each component, what is the color, and what is the font. So right now, just by looking at it, we can see that there's three components. We have a text box, we have a button, and we have a list. And these three components directly translate to three HTML elements. There's text box, button, and unordered list. So now that we know the components that we need, let's gather the heights and widths of them. So as we can see, the text box is 262 pixels wide with a height of 61 pixels. And the button is 61 pixels by 61 pixels. And for the unordered list, the height doesn't so much matter because it'll be variable by the amount of items we're displaying. But we can see that the width is 323 pixels. So let's pull up Sublime Text and let's start recording this information. So here in Sublime Text, I just have a basic HTML page set up. And one of the things I like to do before I start doing anything is to create a mini to-do list so I don't lose track of what I'm trying to do. So here at the top of the body, let's create our to-do list. And the first thing we want to do is gather information about the combo box, which is something that we've already done in Photoshop. So let's jot down this information. We have a text box whose height is 61 pixels, but we're just going to use 60 pixels for now. And the width was 262 pixels, but we're just going to put it as 260 pixels. I'm kind of OCD about my round numbers. And then we had a button. The button was 61 pixels by 61 pixels, but just keeping up with my OCD, I'm going to do 60 pixels and 60 pixels. And then we have our unordered list. And its height is variable, so we don't need to know the number of that. And its width is the combination of the text box and the button, so that's 320 pixels. So now that we have the height and width of each component, let's go get the color and font. So to get the color, let's just use the color dropper. We can click down here where the selected colors are, and we can just drop right here, and we can see that the hexadecimal value is 1F7F5C. And we know that that's the color we need for this button and for this unordered list. So back in Sublime Text, we'll add that as the BG color. So now that we have the green background color, let's check to see what this little border color is right here. So I've zoomed in pretty deep to over 3000%, and we can see this border line. So now I'll select its color, and we can see that it's 2A8664. So in Sublime Text, I'm going to say item border. And now that we have the colors we need, let's check to see what the font is. So I'm going to hit the button T to activate the font tool, and then I'm going to click on the click state. And we can see that the font is Montserrat. And how do we get this font for the web? Well, fortunately for us, it's one of the fonts provided by Google Fonts. Now, those of you who aren't familiar with Google Fonts, you need to stop what you're doing and become familiar. This is one of the greatest tools for developers and designers alike. I've already put Montserrat in the search bar to the left and come up with the result for it. So if I add Montserrat to my collection, and then then I come down here and click use. I can choose the styles that I want for it. I just want normal. And then down here, I can add this style sheet, which will allow me to use Montserrat. Or I can use this import keyword for CSS and copy this into a style sheet at the top. So to keep things concise into a style sheet, I'm just going to use this add import. However, standard though is a great way to go as well. So I'll write what the font is, and we'll be able to paste this into our style sheet later. So now we're done gathering up information about the combo box. So let's finish up our to-do list about the other things that we need to accomplish. So the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to style the text box. And then after that, we're going to want to style the button. Then we're going to want to style the UL. And lastly, we're going to want to create the functionality for showing and hiding the unordered list when we click the button. So now we have a solid to-do list that'll keep us on track while we're creating our combo box. So now let's start with the styling. In the Style Sheets folder, I have a CSS file called square-ui-combobox.css. And here is where we're going to put all of our combo box related styles. So let's get started by referencing it in our HTML file. So now that the file is referenced, let's focus on styling the text box. So we'll copy in our to-do into our CSS file, and we'll change the comment syntax to match CSS. So let's style the text box. We'll target an input element with a type of text. And this input element will have to have a class of txtbox. And the reason why we're using a class is that we're creating an individual component, so we don't want to stomp on any default styles. So we know that the text box will have a font color of black, so we'll put that right here. And we know that it's going to be 60 pixels in height and 260 pixels in width. We'll give it a font size of 18 pixels. We'll get rid of its border, and we're going to give it a padding left of 21 pixels to push the text over. So now we need to set the font to the Montserrat, and we're going to assign the font to all the specific elements. So anything under HTML, input, text area, and A will have a font family of Montserrat. So let's create our element on our page, and we'll give it a value of hello. And we'll make sure to add the class of txtbox. So here we are on our page, and right now all you can see is the word hello. But if we click in it, you'll see that we have the outline of a text box. And let's inspect the element to see its width and height, and it has 260 by 60 pixels. However, if you don't like that you get this blue outline when you click on it, we can change that also in the CSS. So we'll add an outline of none. So now when you click on the box, you don't get that blue outline anymore. But you may not like that you can't see the border of the text box, so you don't actually know how big it is. So for the time being, we can just add a simple border. So we'll change the border to 1 pixel solid, and we'll change it to F0, F0, F0. And so now you can see a bit of an outline around the text box. So now we'll focus in on the button, and we'll create a class of txtbox-button. And so we know that we're going to need a width of 60 pixels, as well as a height of 60 pixels, and that its background is this green color up here. Let's get rid of any border. Let's align any text to the center, and we'll provide a line height of 60 pixels, so our text will be vertically centered in the middle as well. And we're going to want to make the text color white. And if the user chooses to use an anchor tag as the button, it's going to have an underline, so we're going to want to remove that. So we'll set the text decoration to none. So in our HTML, let's add the button. So we'll create an anchor tag, and we'll set a pound as the href, so it's a dead link. And we'll set the class to txtbox-btn. And we'll set the text right now to go. So in Chrome, we can see that we have our button, but it's not quite 60 pixels by 60 pixels. As a matter of fact, it's 22 pixels by 19 pixels. And we can see that we have the styles over here stating 60 pixels by 60 pixels, but what's holding it up? And the reason why is because its display right now is not blocked. So in Chrome's DevTools, if we set the display to block, we'll see that we have this button right here, but it's not on the same line. So if we set it to inline block, it's on the same line. So back in our style sheet, we'll change the display to inline block. So now back in Chrome, you can see that we have our 60 by 60 button and our text box. But you might notice that we're a little bit off on the lining, and that'll change once we start to create the combo box. So let's create a div, and we'll give it a class of combo box. And inside of this div, we'll paste in these two elements right here. So now let's give relative positioning to this combo box so we can absolutely position the button inside the combo box to the right. So we'll create a class for combo box, set its positioning to relative. We'll give it a width of 320 pixels. So we'll take the text box inside the combo box as well as the button inside the combo box, and we'll set its position to absolute. And then we'll take the button and we'll push it all the way to the right. So now we can see in Chrome that our button is pushed all the way to the right, And we can see that our text box and our button are aligned at the top and the bottom. So now if we go through our checklist, we've gathered all the information, we've styled the text box and the button, so now we just have to focus on the unordered list. So below the combo box, we'll create an unordered list, and we'll give it a class of combo box options. So let's create the list items in here, and now we'll focus on the styles. So we'll target the combo box, and we'll use the plus sign to get its sibling of combo box options. And what the plus sign is see we have this combo box right here, and what's directly next to it is the combo box options. So these two elements are siblings of each other, and when you use the plus sign, you can target a sibling. So therefore, when we say the combo box plus combo box options, we're targeting the combo box options that are next to the combo box. So if we move the combo box options away from the combo box, these styles won't apply. So let's set the combo box options width to 320 pixels. Let's set its position to absolute, and we'll set its background color to this green up here, and we'll set the text color to white. So now in Chrome we can see we have a bit of a problem. Our unordered list is on top of our text box and button, and even though we set 320 pixels, it's going a little bit over that. And as we can see, it's actually 360 pixels. And if we check the styles to the right, we can see that we're actually specifying 320. And why is that? And that's because we need to reset some of the styles on the unordered list. So at the top of our style sheet, we'll add in a couple resets for an unordered list. We want to get rid of the bullet points, and we want to set its padding and margin to none. So now back in Chrome, we still have our list on top of our text box and button, but it's at least the width we need it to be now. So to figure out why this list isn't below the text box, let's do some inspecting on the elements. So let's scroll down to the combo box, and the first thing I see is the combo box is 320 pixels by 0 pixels, and that right there seems to be the problem. So if we select the combo box, and if we change the height of the combo box to 60 pixels, we get our list pushed down below our text box and button. So back in our style sheet, we'll set the height to 60 pixels to fix this. So the next thing we need to do is space out these list items a little bit. So for the list items in our combo box, let's set their height to 50 pixels, and let's give them a padding of 12 pixels, and we'll set the border bottom to that border color we captured. So there's the item border up here, and that'll be the border bottom. So now in Chrome, we see that we have bigger list items, but they're not really centered in the middle. So how do we fix that? Well, what we can do is we can take this text and we can wrap it in a span. And now in our style sheet, so now we can target the span inside the list item, and we can set the vertical align to middle. But vertical align middle just won't work by itself. So we need to set a display of table on the list item, and we need to set a display of table cell on the span. And we're also going to need to set the width of the LI to 100%. So now back in Chrome, we can see that we have our LI centered vertically, but we have a bit of a problem with this border over here. If we hover over this LI right here, we can see that its width is 344 pixels. And that's due to the 12 pixel padding we gave it. So we have a couple options to fix this. We could go back and we could change the width of the unordered list to account for the 24 pixels of padding we're giving it, or we could add in box sizing. So at the top of our CSS document, let's add in box sizing. So box sizing is a special property that allows us to forget about math when we're doing padding and widths on our elements. So since we set that text box to have a width of 320 pixels, and then we added padding all around of 12 pixels, we increased the width by 24 pixels. But if we use box sizing, it won't increase the width to 24 pixels. It will actually still keep the width at 320 pixels, but still add the 12 pixels of padding that we want. So essentially what box sizing does is it works the way that you want CSS to work. And by using the star selector right here, we're applying it to every single element on the page. So now you can see that things are looking a little bit better, that we have the actual heights and widths that we specified in our page, and we're not worrying about the padding making them bigger. So we've accomplished 1 through 4 of our checklist, and now all we need to do is we need to show and hide the UL when the button is clicked. So we have a JavaScript section down here, and we have jQuery reference through a CDN. So let's create a self-invoking anonymous function so we aren't putting everything into global scope. And if you're not familiar with the self-invoking anonymous function, I recommend you check out my previous tutorial about flat UI maps, where I explain it in a little bit better of detail. We'll import jQuery, just so we know that the $sign will always mean jQuery. And let's set a click event onto the input button of our combo box. So we'll target the combo box and we'll say on click, we'll find the button, so it'll be a class of txt button, and we'll attach this following event. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get what's clicked. So the button will be clicked. So we'll create a variable called textBoxButton, and we'll assign it to this. So let's log the results of the button, and when we click on it, we can see if we have it in Chrome. And I'm going to use an array notation and get the first item, so we get the native HTML element. So now if we click, we get this anchor tag right here, and if we hover over it, we see that's the go button that we clicked. So since we have the text box button, we can get the unordered list from it. So we're right here in the document tree. If we go up to the parent, we'll be at the combo box. And if we get its sibling, we'll be over at the combo box options. So we can say combo box options is equal to textboxbutton.parent.next. And next is a selector that gets the next element. So since the parent is this combo box, the next element will be combo box options. And since we have combo box options, we can now slide toggle. And slide toggle will keep track of whether the unordered list has been opened or closed. So now if we click on the button, it'll close it, and if we click it, it'll open it. But now let's say you want to click on one of these list items, and when you click on one of these list items, you want to populate this text box just as you would a select element. So let's set a click event for the list items inside the combo box options. So when it's clicked, let's find the list items. So on the click of the list items inside of combo box options, we'll pass in this function, and we can get the selected list item from the this keyword. So just like before, we'll log the selected list item. So in Chrome, when I click likes, down in my JavaScript console, I get the list item that I selected. So since I have the list item, let me get the parent, and I'll just set that to a variable called options, and that'll be selected list item dot parent. And now that I have the parent, let me get its sibling combo box. And now that I have the combo box, let me get the text box that we're trying to put the selected list items value into. So we'll set the text box value to the text of the selected list item. And once we've selected the list item, we want to slide up the options. And before we pull it up in Chrome, let's just test it out by adding more list items. So now we have all the list items. If I click tweets, I get tweets as the value of the text box. If I click the go button again, it scrolls down and we get all of the options. And if I click likes, we get likes in the text box. In this video, we gathered information about the combo box we created. We gathered the height, the width, and the colors and font we needed. We used Google Fonts to get the font we needed, and we used a little jQuery for the functionality. However, we still have a bit of a problem with our component. And the biggest problem that we have is with the jQuery. It's not really abstract enough for us to use over and over again. We would have to use this script every time in a separate file. And if we want to customize it, we're going to have to directly edit this jQuery. And that's kind of a pain. So we could create a jQuery plugin for this, but that's not really the best way to go about it. The best way to go about this would be creating a widget with the jQuery UI widget factory. jQuery UI widgets provide a bit more functionality than plugins. Plugins are great for independent tasks, but when you start to do more than one thing, like adding multiple click events, then you probably want to abstract this out to a widget. Widgets have plenty of built-in features that help you maintain state, whereas with a plugin, you would have to write a lot of it yourself. So in part 2 of this tutorial, we're going to refactor this combo box and turn it into a jQuery UI widget. Like always, if you have any questions or you need something explained in more detail, just let me know in the comments.